Alright, guys, let's talk Trump tariffs today. And this is really has a lot of the hubbub. Paul Ryan's come out and said it's despicable. You've got Cohn leaving, although he don't let that fool you. He got his 238 million in tax breaks for selling his Goldman stock, so he was only there to get that tax break. Don't let any other bullshit fool you on Cohn. Um, Obviously, all the Republican slimy bastards are in a tizzy because of these tariffs. And one of the things you'll always hear is, oh, Smoot Hawley, tariffs caused the Great Depression, which is utter bullcrap. The Great Depression was caused by financial tightening of the monetary supply by the Fed and nothing else. That's very clearly charted. So tariffs is a difficult subject, and I think Trump is making a mistake, but not in the way that you guys might suspect. So Trump has, of course, seen that we've gotten gouged out in our production, our core materials production, coal, steel, and he is putting tariffs on 25% for steel. And then he's going, well, I guess Canada and Mexico will be exempt, maybe. No. This is not how to do it, El Trumpo. The better way to do tariffs is to have, first of all, the very first level of tariff should not be called a tariff. This is very important. The very first level should be what we call a security fee. And the security fee should be about 5%. And it's basically the cost to play in our economy. So if you want to sell your crap here, we're spending so much money on all this security, on our docks, everywhere else. People should cover it. So obviously it's not going to pay for our entire military Uber structure, but we can talk about that another time. So let's start with 5% as just a security fee. The next thing that should happen is a standard structure for fees should be laid out, and it should not be per product or per type of product. It should just be by the evaluation of the country that we're trading with. So, for example, Great Britain, they tend not to have slave factories. They tend to respect copyright. All they would pay would be the 5% fee. Let's add another 5% to that if they do have poor working conditions and poor labor, where people work in these sweatshops. That's Mexico. So that's would be a 10% tariff for Mexico until they improved things. And you could set up a specific criteria and a specific list of things that we would require for them to get over that. Another thing might be for those countries that have good environmental controls. So, okay, China doesn't, so China would get nabbed with 15% tariff. And wait a second, we also want to have another 5% charge for the companies that do not respect international copyright. This is a huge deal with all the counterfeit stuff. China doesn't even buy Microsoft Windows. They just use fake copies everywhere. So Microsoft lets them get away with that because they sell them Word and other things, but really they shouldn't. They just don't really have a choice because the corruption, the sense that you just copy illegally everything and just, get away with it is rampant in China, and it will be until the government changes. So China should have a 20% tariff on everything, on every good sold. So the problem with these steel tariffs is you can say, well, they're for national security. We have to support the steel industry. But how can you really say one industry is more important than any other? What about our electronics? What about our chip production facilities that we've mostly lost to Taiwan and Korea? Those are certainly critical. We can't build a jet fighter today without importing chips from abroad. We don't have the electronics to do it. We don't have the screens for the any of the displays anymore. They all have to be imported. So there's just so many things you could say that, well, we can't do it. Now, another big question is, well, why can't America compete? And this is really where you start to see and learn about the efficiency of a nation. And when you have a nation with 92 million people out of work, adult babies and lisping children all getting paid thousands of dollars every month on the disability rolls, you've got blacks and Hispanics gaming the welfare system by spitting out babies as much as possible and then getting prioritized Section 8 housing. All of this stuff runs into why our nation isn't efficient. You've got doctors gouging. You've got our healthcare system in shambles because doctors demand $700,000 a year salaries rather than $60,000 a year like it is in Germany. Yeah, that's pretty shocking, huh? Even a GP is going to make about $200,000 a year, maybe 175 in America at an HMO, and that's still triple what they will make in Europe. So we are kind of getting screwed on all sides. We're getting screwed with the welfare state. We're getting screwed with the inefficient government. We're getting screwed paying for the warfare state. We're getting screwed with high taxes. We're getting screwed with all the out-of-work people on disability. 92 million Americans. And then let me also say this, theshadowstats.com, we have reduced the unemployment from 23% to 21.8%. Don't anyone believe this 4% nonsense. So I don't think 21.8% unemployment is very good. That sounds pretty crappy. There was also another article recently that 70% of Silicon Valley are now Indians with fake degrees and scam artists. God, don't even get me started. I get so angry about the H-1B genocide of the American software workers. So America is a terribly overrun, corrupt, dysfunctional nation that is going to lose its first world status quickly. If it weren't for the Wehrmacht and invasion of other countries, we would be a backwoods crap hole. I mean, do we even have a tourist market? Do people even come here? They certainly don't come here for the food. Most of our food is crap, and what good food there is amazingly overpriced. I was looking to get just a bowl of noodles or something, and now they're charging $13 for that. I was watching some of these Strictly Dumpling YouTube videos where he's eating this whole deep fried fish and fresh crabs with garlics and chilies. I'm like, I want some of that. It's not to be had. I'm living in a food desert. America has lost its shine, and a large part of making America great again is really reversing these things everywhere. The tariffs simply offset the fact that we are an inefficient nation trying to compete with more efficient nations or more slave predatory nations, which isn't good, of course. But China is facing their own growing middle class growing wages crisis. So even in China, things are getting more difficult to produce the cheapest stuff, and the labor's going to Cambodia, which is still a third world shithole and very cheap. So as I said, just to summarize on tariffs are a difficult boat. It's hard to figure out. The best way to handle it, as I said, is to not make it goods-based, but simply to evaluate other countries and their practices, and if they really are on par with us, then we should be able to compete. We should be able to have a free market if they truly are doing everything we do, which is to have good ecological conditions, good working conditions, reasonable benefits for workers and rights, everything else. So if America had more efficient energy production, if we had more efficient healthcare systems without all these insurance company layer ripping everyone off and then the doctors taking their cut on top of it, we wouldn't have $1,200 a month health insurance plans. It all rolls into the cost of doing business. Lawsuits is another big issue. Tort reform, limiting the amount that people can get. There's an article now on Patriot Mouse where a black woman found, quote unquote, 2 notes that said, blacks should die or the N-word or something. And they gave her $4 million. $4 million. So all of this nonsense, all of these costs where they just assume that government has endless pockets all goes into the cost of producing goods and taxation in the country, and then that suddenly we find our businesses closing because countries which don't have these burdens produce goods more cheaply. So there is a need for a barrier between the first world and the third world, and they should have to pay more to participate in our market. Another last bit of this puzzle to talk about is the VAT, the value added tax. And a lot of our goods go over to Europe, and then they get this value added tax put on top of it, which is very high. It's like, I don't know, 25% or something huge. So that's another thing where we should have reciprocity on that, as well as this generic tariff system. So if all of our goods have a general tax rate in another country, then we have to at least equal that. So we're not going to take Porsches here with zero taxes when we try to sell our Cadillacs and Mustangs over there, and they slap 30% taxes on them. It's just common sense, right? So we should do this based on how countries are behaving, how they're doing business, how they're taxing our goods. India's 100% tax on Harleys, for example. We should just make 100% tax on everything from India. Poof, done. So what do we think about how Trump is doing on this? He's not doing very good. He's being a dolt. He's being a dotard. Wasn't it funny that none of the newscasters could pronounce dotard? Just how stupid are these people on television? Incredibly stupid. It's a word they don't know, and they can't pronounce it because they have never heard it. They're just idiots. So don't get me started. God, don't get me started. Okay, I'm trying to think what other news. They cleaned up the Santa Ana homeless camp, and they found 14,000 syringes and 2 tons of human feces. This is how America's going if we don't get our act in order. Anyways, all these ideas and more are in the book, A Plan for Trump. And it's good reading. I encourage all of you to go and get it. There's a Kindle edition, which isn't very expensive. And that's the show for this week. Just a little note on the Kim Jong-un meeting, which is big in the news. I think it's going to go good. I think 2 things. I think we should have a short-term proposal, which is just to get him denuclearized. But I think if Trump was really amazing, he would say, look, you don't want to take this dictator job, do ya? Sucks. You don't want to do this. Let's give you $1 billion and build you some huge city and live the cushy life, and you can be like the royal family of Korea, and the people could come by and worship you and see you, and you can give a little talk to Congress every year like the Queen of England does, and you can have a good life. You don't want to deal with all this stress. Come on. So I think that's a good strategy for Kim Jong-un, and it would be interesting. I think we should offer him, either in his own country or somewhere else, retirement. And he can bring up to $1 billion with him, something like that. And we'll actually provide another $500 million for building a palace and a secured area. So you can just live the good life. And I don't know, if I were him, I'd take that deal, wouldn't you? I sure would. I mean, I don't think he's that power hungry. I mean, think about it. He was like a student abroad in Europe, and he was just a regular person. He didn't really grow up in a fortress as a dictator's kid, so he knows what the West is like. He's not an idiot. All right, that's my talk for this week, and if you guys like this show, please leave some comments. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think of the patriotmouse.com site, how it's working out. The articles have gotten a little cheesy lately. Please forgive. That's just kind of what's piqued my interest. I sort of follow what's hitting. And the political news has been a little weak lately, a little light, so we're just getting kind of cheesy stories. But there's still some good stuff. Let's take a quick look at the article there. Let's see if anything. The Kansas City riots were pretty good. We've seen the Baltimore Harbor riots by the blacks, and now they're doing the same in Kansas City. Like, hey, you feed the pigeons, you grow a bigger, glut of pigeons. Another thing related to that is, of course, Africa is starving as usual, even though we give them, what is it, $2 billion of food aid every year. The thousands of tons of food shipped to Africa, and they're just growing their population like gangbusters. Gee, I wonder why. That huge population growth from all the food that we ship over actually ends up in us losing our topsoil. We're literally shipping our topsoil out of our country because it ends up going to Africa, and then they poop it out, and then that poop stays over there, and we don't have topsoil here. So it's actually really scary. If you do the studies on the topsoil, they basically used it all up. I mean, it's this mega farming crap that doesn't produce topsoil has really destroyed farming and its required use of pesticides. It's the reason why our food in America is so shitty. So that's no good. Trying to think what else has been going on. Let's keep going through the articles here. Yeah, there was all this talk about Trump pardoning the sailor who took, he was already out of jail, but he took a picture of the submarine. Well, there was actually an earlier pardon. I had never heard of it. This guy, Rubashkin, Rubashkin ran meatpacking factories, made millions of dollars, and he hired nothing but illegals left and right, paid them nothing, terrible conditions. And the funny thing is, he wasn't sent to jail over the illegals. He was sent to jail because they caught so much financial fraud in the company. And so this guy was a total piece of filth, right? This guy was scum as scum gets. And Trump pardoned him, and it did not make the news anywhere. So there's an article on that. There's also an article on this British Columbia protest about this white privilege poster. I rewrote the words slightly. You might want to look at how I changed it to make it more realistic and honest. So I'm sick of these apologies for non-existent white privilege. Anyone who's grown up white and poor in America has nothing to apologize for. And yes, there are a lot of them. 40 women start combat training in the Marines Elite Combat Training class. This is kind of a joke. I just don't see how any of these women would survive hand-to-hand combat or fight off invaders. It's just crazy, but whatever. There's a lot of interest in this article on the shooter in Florida, Nicholas Cruz, and I have probably the best article on the web that pulls out all the inconsistencies. So I encourage you to take a look at that. There's just so much wrong with that case. I literally would not be surprised if they weren't finding patsies, drugging them up, and then sending in commandos to do the dirty work. There's so much bullshit going on with that stuff. It's not a fake shooting. I think the shooting really happened, but I think it was done by black state, basically. You'll have to read the article, and you'll probably come away a bit surprised. Okay, that's it for now. Again, please leave some comments, give some feedback, let me know how you're enjoying things, and hopefully you will subscribe and consider also supporting us on Patreon. Thank you.